At midnight, Clarence's house was disrupted when a royal guard stopped Camilla's SUV, noting its rear was unusually heavy. Prince William arrived unexpectedly, his face pale but resolute. He demanded that the sealed steel box inside the vehicle be opened immediately. Gasps filled the air. Inside the box were Princess Diana's private letters and diaries, documents believed to have been destroyed forever. Within hours, investigators descended into the cellar of Clarence's house, where they uncovered hidden jewels directly linked to Queen Elizabeth II. Murmurs turned to outrage. The monarchy was shaken to its core. Decades-old secrets were dragged into the light. Meanwhile, Camilla vanished into the night as the palace braced for its most explosive scandal since Diana's tragic passing. The usually quiet halls of Clarence's house were shadowed when a guard on patrol noticed something amiss. One of Camilla's black SUVs sat heavily near the gates, its rear noticeably sagging under a suspicious load. Though it looked ordinary at first, the guard trained eye caught the odd detail. Following protocol, he investigated and reported the situation. The calm of Clarence's house began to crack as security swarmed the scene. The word spread fast. Camilla's car would not be leaving. Questions buzzed through the corridors. Why was her vehicle so heavily loaded at such a late hour? The answer came with perfect timing. Prince William arrived unannounced. Witnesses later described his face as unreadable, calm but tense. He demanded to see what was inside. The guard hesitated, caught between rules and royal authority, but William's command was absolute. The trunk was opened to reveal a heavy, sealed steel box, too substantial for mere keepsakes, too secretive to be coincidence. Suspicion turned to dread. The box was brought inside and placed under bright lights. William ordered it opened immediately in front of witnesses. Silence thickened as bolts were undone and the lid lifted. Inside were not jewels or official documents, but something far more dangerous: Princess Diana's handwritten letters and diaries. Gasps erupted. Some aides stepped back in shock. These were Diana's private thoughts, her fears, hopes, and reflections, long thought destroyed. Yet here they were, hidden like contraband in Camilla's car. For William, seeing these pages was like a wound reopening. His mother's voice, captured in ink and locked away by the woman most often seen as her rival. His hands trembled as he touched the fragile papers. Whispers grew into an uproar. How had these letters survived? Why were they here? And most perilously, what would happen if their contents became public? If this midnight revelation stunned you, stay tuned, because what investigators found next, deep beneath Clarence's house, was even more explosive. William stood motionless, tracing the edges of his mother's handwriting as if fearing it might vanish. The suffocating silence was broken only by the quiet breaths of staff who knew they had witnessed history. These letters were not just relics. They were Diana's unfiltered voice from beyond the grave, personal and exposed. Every line was a reminder of the woman he lost and the haunting questions she left behind: betrayal, fear, loneliness. Her words were wounds that never healed. William's jaw clenched. He was no longer a prince in that moment, but a son witnessing the theft of his mother's memory. The gravity of the discovery reached the king's private chambers. Charles appeared shaken, initially demanding answers. How could such items end up in his wife's possession? He soon faced the unbearable optics. Camilla, the queen consort, long portrayed as Diana's rival, was now tied to the concealment of Diana's most private words. Charles faced a monarch's torment: defend his wife and risk appearing complicit, or side with his son and risk fracturing his marriage under the glare of history. Either way, the monarchy teetered on the edge of scandal. Whispers filled corners as senior staff scrambled to contain the damage. Some insisted the letters be locked away, sealed, and hidden once again. But William refused. His voice was steady but firm. These letters were his mother's legacy, not secrets to be buried. Those present described a confrontation between father and son that was both quiet and devastating. William's restrained fury burned beneath his calm. Charles pleaded for peace, stressing family unity as vital. But unity was impossible with Diana's presence haunting the room, her words in William's hands like fire. Outside, the night faded into dawn. Clarence House, a symbol of tradition and composure, had become a fortress of dread and whispers. Guards lined the halls, aides hurried between rooms, and a crisis pulse gripped the estate. No one could explain why Camilla had the steel box, nor dare suggest it might have been deliberate. The pressure mounted. What else was hidden? What other secrets might emerge if someone dared to look? Diana's letters were no longer just a scandal. They were the spark that could ignite a firestorm, consuming everything. And even as London's sun rose, one truth was clear. This was only the beginning. Something far more dangerous lay buried deep within Clarence House's cellar. As dawn brightened London, Clarence House was no longer a sanctuary. Its halls buzzed with whispered rumors. Guards wore grim expressions. Staff exchanged nervous glances. The discovery of Diana's diaries had shaken Trust's foundation. But the night held another secret, one even more devastating. Investigators, driven by unease, turned to the residence's basement and storage areas. Clarence House had always been a maze of hidden rooms. Wine cellars, supply closets, locked vaults seldom disturbed. But that morning, nothing was left untouched. In the cold stone cellar, a guard's flashlight revealed 3 large wooden crates, reinforced with steel and tightly bolted. Their presence raised immediate suspicion. These were not official storage boxes, nor part of any known inventory. They seemed deliberately concealed. The air grew heavier as the crates were pried open. One by one, their contents glittered in the dim light. Heirlooms and jewels unmistakably from the royal collection. A diamond brooch once worn by Queen Elizabeth II. A sapphire necklace gifted during a state visit. An emerald choker from early in a reign. These were no mere trinkets or misplaced keepsakes. They were priceless royal artifacts, symbols of heritage, history, and duty, quietly hidden within Camilla's domain. Gasps and murmurs echoed as aides recognized each piece. Some looked away in disbelief. Others scribbled frantic notes. The implications were staggering. If the jewels were hidden here, what else was kept secret? How many treasures had slipped from records into concealment? The news reached the king swiftly. Charles, already reeling from Diana's letters, now faced a nightmare of even greater magnitude. This was no longer just about private diaries. It was about the crown jewels themselves, the treasures linked to Elizabeth's legacy and the monarchy's legitimacy. William, upon hearing the news, immediately descended into the cellar. Witnesses described him standing rigid before the open crates, his face etched with anger and disbelief. For him, the scandal had become personal, betrayal made tangible, shimmering in diamonds and emeralds. Questions swirled without answers. How long had the jewels been here? Why weren't they cataloged? And most troubling, was this negligence or a deliberate claim on what was not theirs? The atmosphere in Clarence House shifted from suspicion to outright fear. The monarchy had been thrust into a crisis with no easy escape. Staff whispered that this scandal could no longer be contained. The story was too vast, too explosive, and if exposed, would spread like wildfire. Outside, the palace gates remained closed. Inside, tension thickened with the knowledge that the cellar discovery was only the beginning. It was the fuse to a far greater threat. News of the cellar's contents spread through the royal household, and by full daylight, one person had already made her choice. Princess Anne, known for her blunt honesty, relentless work ethic, and fierce loyalty to her mother's memory, and refused to stand by while scandal poisoned the monarchy. She arrived at Clarence House with the calm determination of a soldier heading into battle. Witnesses noted her sharp gaze, purposeful steps, and eyes cold with resolve, and had heard whispers before, rumors of missing treasures, odd discrepancies, staff murmurs about valuables disappearing whenever Camilla was involved. But rumors weren't enough anymore. Now there was proof, and carried something no one else did. A sealed letter from Queen Elizabeth II herself, entrusted to her before the Queen's death. The letter had remained unread for months, hidden among personal papers. But that morning, as the jewel crates lay open and broke the seal, inside, Elizabeth's unmistakable handwriting delivered a command that cut through the chaos. She named and guardian of her jewels, protector of the collection, with strict instructions that the treasures were never to be treated as personal possessions. They were not ornaments to hoard. They were a legacy to preserve for the nation, passed on with dignity, and wasted no time. Before senior aides, security, and her brother, she read the letter aloud. Elizabeth's words carried undeniable weight. Charles shifted uncomfortably, caught between his mother's authority and loyalty to his wife. William stood tall beside, and a living reminder of another absent figure, Diana, whose shadow grew with every passing hour. Camilla, confronted, tried to defend herself. She claimed the jewels were safe. That paranoia fueled false accusations. But her voice faltered against the mounting evidence. The steel box in her car, the crates in her cellar, and now the Queen's letter, each piece dismantling her credibility. And, no stranger to straightforwardness, spoke with quiet authority. The jewels must be returned intact. Records corrected. Secrecy ended. Her words weren't requests, they were demands. Those present said the room grew icy. It felt as if the late Queen had entered through Anne's voice. Her message was clear: guardianship, not possession. Camilla had no room to maneuver. For years, and had been seen as practical and plain-spoken, the workhorse sister who avoided drama. That morning, she transformed into something else, the defender of her mother's legacy and an unyielding force against betrayal. Clarence House was no longer a house divided by whispers. It had become a battlefield, and had just fired the first shot in a reckoning that would shake the monarchy's core. As the storm inside Clarence House raged, another voice was poised to enter the fray, a voice long silent but never forgotten. Princess Diana's words, preserved in writing, returned with the force of a prophecy. Prince Harry had been watching the situation from afar, but once the news about the cellar broke, he could no longer stay silent. He arrived with a collection of photographs, notes, and personal letters entrusted to him years before. These were pieces of Diana's life, snippets of her handwriting, candid photos, and private thoughts. Among them was one detail that sent chills through everyone present: evidence of a missing heirloom. The photographs showed Diana wearing a delicate pearl bracelet, a treasured possession from her time as Princess of Wales. Alongside these images were Diana's own words, penned in her unmistakable script, warning that some heirlooms might one day be falsely claimed. This wasn't a vague remark, but a direct warning. And the bracelet? It had appeared in none other than Camilla's private vault. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. William froze, his brother's evidence confirming every suspicion. To him, this wasn't just about jewels. It was a betrayal of their mother's memory. Diana's voice, conveyed through ink and photos, joined Anne's battle. Now, two forces, the late Queen Elizabeth and Princess Diana, stood united against Camilla's defenses. Witnesses remembered Camilla's pale face, her usual composure faltering as the pressure mounted. No explanation could erase the fact that Diana's cherished bracelet was found among Camilla's belongings. It was as if Diana herself had reached out from beyond to demand justice. Often seen as the more emotional sibling, Harry spoke with surprising calm. He reminded everyone that these heirlooms were more than ornaments. They symbolized family continuity and legacy. Concealing them was not only deceit, but theft of history. The atmosphere grew heavier. Aides avoided eye contact, guards stiffened, and even Charles looked hollow, caught between his love for Camilla and the undeniable voices of his late wife and mother. For William, the discovery cut deeply. He had spent his life defending Diana's legacy, carrying the pain of her absence like a silent wound. Now, with Harry beside him, that pain ignited into fierce resolve. Together, they stood not just as sons, but as guardians of their mother's memory. The combination of Elizabeth's sealed letter naming and protector Diana's warnings, and the reappearance of the bracelet united William and Harry, if only briefly, to defend their mother's name. The monarchy had never faced such a reckoning, two ghosts speaking as one, reopening wounds the institution had long tried to bury. With mounting evidence, Clarence House could no longer contain the scandal. It was about to spill over into Balmoral, the monarchy's most sacred retreat, where the confrontation would reach its climax. Balmoral had always been a refuge. Nestled in the Scottish Highlands, it was where Elizabeth II found solace, spending summers wandering the heathered hills and evenings by cozy fires. Bringing scandal there was unthinkable. Yet, Balmoral became the setting for the monarchy's most dramatic showdown in decades. Princess and insisted the reckoning could not stay confined to Clarence House. If truth was to be faced, it had to happen on hallowed ground, the estate their mother treasured most. So, beneath Scotland's grey skies, family members gathered in tense silence, the air thick with history and betrayal. Inside the grand hall, and stood resolute. In her hands were two crucial pieces of evidence: her mother's sealed letter appointing her guardian of the jewels, and Diana's notes, delivered by Harry, warning of heirlooms that might be falsely claimed. The impact was devastating. The words of two women, now silent, echoed through Anne's steady voice. Camilla tried to defend herself, claiming misunderstanding, blaming misplaced records for exaggerations, and appealing for sympathy. But Balmoral was not London. Here, Elizabeth's presence was palpable, her portrait on the wall, her spirit in every corner. Camilla's words faltered against the weight of Elizabeth's authority. Witnesses recalled the moment and read the Queen's letter aloud. Her voice rang through the hall, steel wrapped in sorrow. Guardianship, not possession, Elizabeth had written. Those words left no room for excuses. The jewels were not to be claimed. They were to be protected, preserved, and passed down with dignity. One by one, treasures from Camilla's vault were revealed: the Victorian diamond flower brooch, the sapphire necklace, the emerald choker, and finally Diana's pearl bracelet. Each piece carried not just monetary value, but a story, a memory, a legacy, and each exposed in Balmoral's hall became undeniable proof of betrayal. Charles sat silently, torn as only a king could be, between duty and love, truth and loyalty. His shoulders sagged as the evidence mounted. For Camilla, escape was impossible. Every defense crumbled under the weight of proof. Every charm offensive faded into silence. She was cornered, diminished, stripped of credibility before the family she had sought to join. When it ended, Camilla had no choice but to concede. The jewels were returned to the royal collection. Records were corrected, and Elizabeth's promise honored. But the victory was far from joyful. It was heavy with humiliation and sorrow. For Anne, the reckoning was bittersweet. She had fulfilled her mother's command, but at the cost of exposing wounds that would never fully heal. For Camilla, it marked the lowest point of her public life. And for the monarchy, it shattered the illusion of unity within Balmoral's walls. Though the Balmoral confrontation concluded with the jewels restored, peace was not regained. Instead, fractures deepened. Outwardly, the monarchy maintained a polished front, smiles for cameras, staged appearances, royal waves to reassure the public. Behind closed doors, though, betrayal scars ran deep. Camilla emerged diminished. Though she kept her title, her authority was hollowed. Formerly warm staff became distant. Courtiers whispered doubts. For years she had fought for acceptance, but every glance reminded her of what had been exposed. And, by contrast, rose in prominence, transforming from dutiful daughter to guardian of legacy, the one who upheld her mother's words when others faltered. Even those who once dismissed her bluntness grew to respect and resolve. Inside the palace, her influence quietly expanded, her voice carrying more weight than ever. William, shaken but determined, took his mother's diaries back into his care. To him, the matter was not just jewels or inheritance. It was his mother's truth, long buried and almost stolen. His trust in Camilla was broken, and his relationship with his father strained under the weight of silent resentment. Though living apart from the core family, Harry found renewed connection with William in that moment. For once, the brothers stood united, their loyalty to Diana overcoming years of division. Charles bore the heaviest burden, forced to witness his wife's humiliation and his mother's wishes laid bare in writing. He tried to maintain public composure, but he could not ignore the truth. Trust within his family was fractured, perhaps irreparably. Every decision afterward carried the shadow of Balmoral. New palace protocols required stricter inventories of the royal collection. No jewel could be borrowed or moved without signatures, witnesses, and verification. The old tradition of casually passing heirlooms for private use gave way to rigorous oversight. To the public, nothing seemed wrong. To insiders, it was a constant reminder of betrayal. For Camilla, every public appearance became a trial. Whenever she wore a necklace or brooch, whispers followed. Was this one of the pieces once hidden? Could her smile erase the memory of jewels discovered in her cellar? The answer was always no. The stain lingered. The fallout was about more than jewels. It was about loyalty, guardianship, and how quickly trust can shatter. Clarence House and Balmoral had uncovered truths the monarchy had hoped to hide. But history, once revealed, would not be silenced. The Clarence House scandal was never just about jewels or diaries. It was about guardianship versus possession, duty versus ambition, loyalty versus betrayal. In the weeks following Balmoral, these themes echoed through the monarchy, reshaping perceptions of every family member. For Camilla, the damage was permanent. Though she smiled at events and delivered speeches with practiced warmth, suspicion clung to her like a shadow. Staff who once admired her now whispered doubt. The public, shielded from full details, sensed enough to grow wary. Inside the family, her credibility was fractured beyond repair. She had not only mishandled the crown's trust, but nearly destroyed it. Meanwhile, and steadfast defense of Elizabeth's letter and insistence on transparency elevated her from dutiful royal to moral anchor. Though she sought no spotlight, it found her. Elizabeth's phrase, guardianship, not possession, became a quiet motto, and embodied those words when it mattered most. William carried his mother's diaries like sacred relics. More than paper, they were fragments of a voice silenced too soon. Each reading reminded him why he stepped forward that night at Clarence House. Protecting Diana's memory became part of his role as heir. Harry's brief but decisive involvement, bringing Diana's photos and notes, forced the palace to confront uncomfortable truths. For a rare moment, the brothers stood united, defending their mother's dignity. To the public, even without full disclosure, whispers of their joint stand inspired admiration. The scandal also transformed the royal collection's meaning. The jewels were no longer mere ornaments worn at ceremonies. They became symbols of the struggle between secrecy and transparency, possession and duty. Each brooch, necklace, and bracelet told a story, not just of history, but of betrayal narrowly avoided. Behind palace walls, tension remained. Staff joked bitterly that nothing left its velvet case without 10 signatures. Beneath the humor was fear. If jewels had been hidden once, what proof was there others hadn't vanished quietly over the years? Suspicion tainted every inventory, every record check, every whispered conversation. Yet amid bitterness, there was resilience. Anne's firmness, William's anger, Harry's evidence. Together, they honored the women whose voices nearly vanished. Elizabeth's letter and Diana's notes, two legacies intertwined, reminded the monarchy that silence is no protection. Courage is. The lesson was clear. History cannot be hoarded. Legacy cannot be locked away. It must be defended, sometimes at the cost of comfort, sometimes at the cost of family unity. For Anne, William, and Harry, that price was worth paying. For Camilla, the cost was her irreparable credibility. Time passed, but the memory of the Clarence House scandal never faded. Though jewels were quietly restored and public unity maintained, those who knew the truth understood it could never be erased. The cellar, the steel box, the diaries, the Balmoral confrontation, all left scars too deep to heal. For Camilla, each day was endurance. She attended events, her smile polished, her composure rehearsed. Yet beneath pearls and diamonds, whispers persisted. Every necklace sparked unspoken questions. Was it one of the hidden pieces? Could it ever again symbolize dignity, or only betrayal? The jewels shone, but trust was forever dulled. Charles carried his own burden, watching his wife's credibility crumble while his mother's words and Diana's warnings echoed through the halls. Though he sought stability, the scandal revealed fractures no crown could fix. His reign, meant to bridge tradition and modernity, was haunted by ghosts, Elizabeth's, Diana's, and the choices he had made in life and love, and remained unwavering. She had protected her mother's wishes and earned a reputation as the monarchy's fiercest guardian. Her voice, once blunt and plain, became the one courtiers trusted most. Without a crown, she held something weightier, moral authority. Even those who once overlooked her now saw her as a pillar holding history upright. For William, the reckoning was deeply personal. He confronted the theft of his mother's memory and emerged not only as her defender, but as the heir who would not shrink from painful truth. The image of him clutching Diana's diaries remains etched in memory, a prince transformed into a protector and living voice of a legacy. Harry's role, though divergent from the royal path, was crucial. By presenting Diana's photographs and notes, he ensured her voice could not be silenced. For a rare, extraordinary moment, the brothers stood united, fighting for their mother's dignity. Ultimately, the scandal was more than misplaced jewels. It was a test of loyalty, a battle for truth, and a reminder that even palaces cannot keep secrets buried forever. Clarence House's cellar, once a quiet shadowed space, became a symbol of betrayal revealed. Balmoral, once a sanctuary, became the stage of reckoning. Above it all, two voices remained: Elizabeth's firm command, guardianship, not possession, and Diana's haunting warning that heirlooms might be wrongly claimed. Together, these voices forced the monarchy to face its fractures. The jewels gleamed once more at public occasions, polished and displayed. But for those who knew the truth, they reflected a different light, one of betrayal, courage, and the price of legacy. The Clarence House scandal would not be remembered as just a story of lost and found ornaments. It would be remembered as the moment when loyalty clashed with ambition, truth fought to emerge from shadows, and a family bound by tradition discovered that courage, not silence, is the only guardian strong enough to protect legacy.